The story I'm about to tell has long clung to me as something shameful and difficult, though it wasn't my fault. I'm 49 now, with a family, a job, a home, and a life I once clung to with all my might. But to understand who I've become, I need to go back to where everything fell apart. I was 11 when my mother died. Lung cancer. The disease devoured her in less than a year, and all that time I lived between school, the hospital, and the fear that one day I'd return home, and she wouldn't be there. And so it happened. After the funeral, my father and I were left alone. He worked as an interstate driver and was away often, but when he was home, we clung to each other. I truly believed we could make it through. When I turned 13, my father met a woman named Rebecca. She seemed kind and caring, always smiling and bringing me sweets. A year later, they married, and her children, her eldest son, Ethan, and her youngest daughter, Chloe, moved into our house in Ohio. Chloe and I quickly hit it off. She was quiet, loved drawing, and listening to music. But with Ethan, things were different. He was a year older than me, abrupt, quick-tempered, and used to being in charge. Tension arose between us almost immediately. My father constantly told me, "Be patient." It was hard for him without his father. I remained silent, though inside I was seething. Why were his difficulties more important than mine? Why didn't anyone remember that I, too, had lost my mother? At 15, I started dating a girl from school named Madison. It was a naive teenage relationship, but she meant a lot to me. That's when I noticed Ethan was looking at her too closely. One day, we got into a fight. He accused me of taking away something he liked. My father separated us, and as always, I was left to blame. A few months later, shortly after my 16th birthday, something happened that changed my life forever. Rebecca was sorting through laundry and suddenly screamed as if something terrible had happened. Everyone came running into the room. She was holding Chloe's underwear and shaking it at me, demanding an explanation for why it was in my drawer. I was shocked. I didn't know where it came from, and I told them so. They didn't believe me. Ethan claimed he'd been noticing strange looks from me for a while, that I'd said nasty things. Madison, who was at our house that day, slapped me in the face and ran out, screaming that I was disgusting. My father wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, pushed me out the door, and said he wouldn't allow someone like that near his daughter. I stood on the porch, crying, begging for a chance to explain myself. The door opened only once, for me to be pushed down the steps. My father said I was no longer his son. That evening, I found myself on the street with a backpack and a few dollars. I had nowhere to go. My father's side of the family refused to help. He had already explained everything. I slept in alleys and at bus stops, learning to survive in a way no teenager should have to. Those were the 2 darkest years of my life. I left the city and moved south to Texas, where I accidentally found a job at a gym. There, for the first time, I realized I could channel my anger and pain into something that wouldn't destroy me completely. Later, there was therapy, a long road to normalcy, and my first attempt at trusting people again. But then, at 16, I was simply a discarded child, betrayed by everyone who was supposed to protect me. It took years before I stopped waking up at night with the same dream, standing on the porch of my home, the door slamming shut. It took me almost 10 years to learn to live without the constant expectation of a blow. Living in Texas was the beginning of a slow recovery. I worked first as a janitor at a gym, then as an assistant trainer, and later landed a stable job as an apprentice electrician on construction sites outside of Houston. The work was hard but honest, and it was exactly what I needed. When I turned 34, I met a woman named Sarah. We met at a small diner near a construction site, where I often ate breakfast after my shift. She worked there as a waitress, took evening classes, and dreamed of opening her own cafe. There was none of the movie magic between us, just conversations, laughter, and the feeling that with her, I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. The age difference was noticeable, but she never made a problem out of it. Sarah turned out to be the person who patiently taught me simple things, that not everyone leaves, that not every conflict ends in exile, that love can be peaceful. She insisted that I finish school as an external student, helping me believe that I deserved more than just survival. 3 years later, we were married. Now we have 3 children, a house in the suburbs, and that same silence I once dreamed of while lying on the cold pavement. I hardly thought about the past. Therapy taught me to let go. Not to forgive, but to let go. People who chose to believe lies are left behind, in another life. That's why the email I received in early spring unsettled me. The sender was Chloe. I stared at the name for a long time before I decided to open the message. More than 30 years had passed. She wrote at length, haltingly, as if she were afraid I'd close the letter halfway through. She told me the truth had come out by accident. Ethan, now a grown man, got drunk at a get-together with old friends and started bragging about how he got rid of me as a teenager. How he planted my underwear, how he lied about me, how he laughed at the fact that I ended up on the street. He said it as if it were a stupid joke. His wife, Madison, overheard her words. She didn't keep quiet. It was she who called Chloe and told her everything. Then there was a scene, screaming, tears. Her father, according to Chloe, burst into tears for the first time in his life and said he couldn't forgive himself for what happened. They wanted a meeting. They wanted to apologize. They wanted to start over. I reread the letter several times. There was no anger.
No joy.
There was only a strange feeling of emptiness. Too much time had passed. I had lived too much without them. I finally responded. Not harshly, not sarcastically. I wrote that I was grateful for their honesty and that I was glad the truth had come out. But I also wrote that my life had long been built without them, that my wounds were a part of me, and I wasn't ready to reopen them. I wished Chloe peace and asked her not to write anymore. Sarah read my reply and simply hugged me. She said she was proud of me, not for what I had endured, but for choosing myself. Sometimes justice comes too late to fix things. But it still matters. Not for them, for me. Because now I know for sure it was not like that with me all this time. And this knowledge is enough for me.